Hello, and thanks for joining me today. My name is Rocky. I'm with DriveSavers Data Recovery. We're going to speak about digital doomsday, avoiding data loss and disaster. Give you a better idea on how storage fails in the digital arts world. So with that being said, how do they fail? Most people are going to be familiar with an electromechanical failure. That is going to be when you've got a head crash or you've got an external that fell on its side and it's starting to click away where the read-write sensors are physically touching the platter surface themselves. Similar to a record player, the internals are similar. However, there isn't a needle in a groove. It's going to be a read-write sensor reading the data that's held magnetically on those platters. Not necessarily a failure, but sometimes an oopsie. We delete things. We might empty out a trash bin or securely delete something that we think we might not need. Who knows, a week later, a month later, you're going to edit a portrait shoot and you realize you're missing some photos. Natural disasters, which can be anything from tornadoes to hurricanes to earthquakes, just about everything in the 40 plus years that DriveSavers has been around. I've seen a lot of these events from Hurricane Harvey. We've got Beryl, which is current, but a lot of earthquakes. The Haiti earthquake, we saw a MacBook that was almost folded in half and we were able to recover the data. And then things happen. You might have a water bottle that is in your backpack with your laptop or your book bag, your briefcase, and it leaks and you go to power up your laptop and inside that screen, it looks like a fishbowl. So going back to electromechanical failure, I mentioned dynamic head contact or a head crash. Other things that can go wrong are firmware corruption, in which the drive will no longer mount due to either that firmware corruption, the printed circuit board on the back of the drive, a crack. It could be due to being dropped. Heat can be a factor in many of these types of failures. And a spindle motor failure, which is the motor that actually spins the drive up itself, can have an issue. Many times we see this with power spikes. That could be a brownout with your local power provider where they shut power down briefly in a heat wave. It could be a surge protector that failed. And it can even be a fan or a cooling system issue. If you've got your giant PC with fans in there, over time, the vents can clog with dust, dirt, debris, and cause issues in which the cooling system is not as efficient. And that heat can cause issues within that drive, as well as the rest of the computer. Deletions, going back to that portrait shoot, let's say you shot through a card, had a couple client shoots on there, you accidentally reformat it. It could be that you thought you backed it up and then format it. It could be that it's just corrupt, unreadable. You pull it out of the camera, you put it into a card reader, comes up as unreadable or unmountable. You put it back in the camera, hook the camera up, and sure enough, it's not readable there either. Certainly something that I've seen myself, even with a point and shoot camera, it does happen. And then again, natural disasters, we touched on that. Electrical storms, fires, where DriveSavers is based in Northern California, unfortunately, we deal with regularly. Floods, we've seen, especially after hurricanes and whatnot, we've seen so many different devices that have been underwater, from personal computers to large RAID arrays with 100 plus hard drives in there that have been literally sitting in brackish water with salt water, et cetera, and starts to cause a lot of corrosion. Earthquakes, again, tsunamis, it's something that no one can expect for these events to happen, but of course they do. And usually the damage is catastrophic to storage devices, as well as, of course, everything else in our lives, from houses to cars to buildings, etc. But usually data is one of those things affected. Some folks out there might understand what a RAID is, a redundant array of independent disks. Once you hook up to it, it looks like one volume or one drive, but really they are a grouping of drives. You could have two drives and preferably a mirror when both of those drives are separate but have the same data set. So one is a copy of the other, and you're saving data to both of those drives. You could have a 4-drive RAID 5 where you've got the ability for one of those drives to fail and the device would still run in a graded mode, and there is parity saved to those drives, in which you can load another drive in and it can rebuild itself due to that parity. But if you have a second drive fall offline, the data becomes inaccessible. So how do these raids fail? Just like all the different scenarios I mentioned previously, they can fail in a multitude of ways. But the one thing I would just urge folks to remember, that a RAID system is great, redundant. However, it's not a backup. You always want to be sure to have a copy of that RAID system, preferably in the cloud, or a copy that is not on premise with that data set. Maybe if you're a small business, you've got a NAS device or a RAID array, you back that up once a week, or even better, once a day, and bring that drive home with you, as well as having a backup of that in the cloud. Malware and ransomware is something that isn't as prevalent as an accidental deletion or a drive failure, but it is something to be wary about, and we see it. And whether that's an external hard drive that's connected to your computer, or if it's a RAID device that's connected to your computer, if your network is hit or your computers are hit, anything attached to that can be affected by that ransomware. Again, something to be said for backing up those devices and making sure that backup is not connected and off premise. So many of you folks probably know this, but it never hurts to brush up on it. 3-2-1 backup strategy, having 3 copies of your data, 2 of those copies stored locally, and then again, 1 copy offsite or potentially in the cloud. Personally, what I like to do is I have a cloud solution as well as a external drive, an SSD that will live in a fire safe, and of course have a copy of that data living on my computer. The cloud can be a great asset. It can be a little bit slower when you're uploading or downloading. So again, having a second physical copy that you can plug in can help with those data transfers and speed up some of those backups. But again, making sure that you've got 3 copies of that data, 2 locally, and then 1 offsite. So some of the folks that are out there may shoot high quality, high res video, photographers with maybe multiple shoots a week. A lot of data out there, and 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte external might not be enough. Many people will have 2 slots in their camera. Shooting with 2 cards is always a good practice. If one of those cards comes back corrupt, you'd have a second. Duplicating data ASAP. Let's say, for example, if I was a wedding photographer, a destination photographer, sports photographer, as soon as the break, I would back those cards up to a computer, and even better would be to transfer that data as well to a small portable SSD. I prefer a solid state drive just because they're less moving parts. Of course, they're going to be a lot less susceptible to getting bumped, and they're a lot smaller of a form factor, and your read and write speeds are a lot faster. So you can push data and move data to them quite a bit quicker. Tiered storage is always great. So let's say you've got your working machine where you do all your editing, where you store all of your photos that you're currently working on. Maybe you're backed up in the cloud. Maybe you have a RAID array that's backing that system up. Also store archive data. Clients might order prints in the future or order more copies, or gosh, hey, I deleted my photos on accident. Can you send those to me again? I would use an external hard drive or something that's in a hard drive form, because larger storage in a hard drive, a spinning disk, is going to be quite a bit cheaper than solid state drive, NVMe flash memory. So having a tiered storage, maybe you have that older archive footage backed up onto 1 or 2 larger externals, and then that can be moved from the working machine, wherever you're editing, etc. One thing we hear is the story of, I was backing up and gosh, my computer had an issue. I spilled coffee on it, and sure enough, I went to plug in my backup and it didn't do anything. And I took it to my local computer shop, brought it to my IT guy, my IT gal, etc. They couldn't help out. At the end of the day, test your backups. That's the big one. I try to test mine once or twice a week. Sometimes it's once a month. Life gets a little crazy, but just making sure that not only are they still functioning, but the data that you think is there is actually living there. And this is always good to do with cloud backup providers. Make sure that what you're putting up there is there. And it's always good to confirm than assume that something is being backed up. So this slide gives a little information about what we see when it comes to issues with a micro SD card. For example, the card is plugged into a reader or the camera and it doesn't mount and it's inaccessible, but the card looks fine. Oftentimes we'll use X-ray technology to look in and see if anything has cracked or if there's disbonds within the silicone, and helps us improve the way we can evaluate, say, water damage. For example, the corrosion under that MacBook Pro chip. On the other side, there is an Apple PCIe solid state drive. It does speed up our ability to find out what a problem is for a flash memory or NVMe solid state drive. So last but not least, you got a great backup, but the inevitable happens and you need to use a data recovery provider. When I say inevitable, it's because we can back up 6 ways to Sunday, but Murphy's Law is always out there. And I've been there myself. I've had multiple backups or thought something was backed up and it wasn't. But regardless, if you do need to leverage the capabilities of a data recovery provider, you Google data recovery, you're going to find so many people out there all claiming to do the same thing and get 100% of your data back, right? So always vet who is that data recovery provider. You got to remember that it's client photos. Are these people vetted? Background checks for employees, data security, is there chain of custody when that data recovery project is moving through different engineering departments? And a big one out there is a SOC 2 Type 2 audit, a security audit that providers can go through once a year to ensure that they are following protocol. DriveSavers is SOC 2 Type 2 audited. We're FERPA compliant, HIPAA compliant, and we provide all that information on our website. And then another big thing to ask is, when you send my data back, can you encrypt it? If a customer asks us and or it is regulated data, we will always send data back on an encrypted drive. So thank you very much. And if you do have an urgent data recovery need, give a call. Our 800 staff 24/7. Thank you. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
DriveSavers, we can save it.